am leaning into this idea of a portfolio career and this concept of having, many skills. I don't necessarily think that everybody should have all of the skills, right? So if you're a really strong marketer, it is a skill in itself to be able to delegate or to find those people with that background, right? So with me being on the team, it really alleviates some of the pressure for these other content strategists or the other marketers.
I'm Nicole MacLean, and this is Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. Our show consists of 3 parts. One, where we pull in other Composely team members to talk about content that matters to you, like a viral LinkedIn post or the latest trend. The second always includes an in-depth interview with a leading marketer, sharing actionable insights and a little inspiration. And finally, you won't want to miss the last segment, aptly called Friends Matter, where we're shouting out some of your friends and mine for their content wins in B2B marketing. Let's cut through the marketing chaos together.
Okay, very excited to have another great Composely face join the show this week. We have our own content creator, Franny Harold. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. Happy to be here.
Of course. Yes, you're heralding from LA. I can't believe I've never actually used that before. That's too good.
That is pretty wild. You've never made that pun.
I haven't, but no better time than a podcast, right?
Yes, an exclusive.
Exclusive pun. You guys get to hear it first. Franny is joining us because later in the episode, when we dive in with Sam, we have this really great conversation about this idea of career pathing, specifically this term portfolio career, which really stayed with me because I feel like if you talk to any marketer, very few actually went to school for marketing, have this rich pedigree in marketing. We all have this, unique background that eventually led us to a marketing career. Mm-hmm. And yet so much of marketing is very linear, even just careers outside of marketing. We think of it as a ladder. That's not always what is the best interest in the person or in the company. And so, of course, I wanted to have Franny join us because you have such a fun and unique background that you get to bring to content creation. And I'm just kind of want to get your thoughts on, should it be linear? Is it okay to bounce around? What does that look like nowadays?
Well, I hope it's okay to bounce around, because if not, then I've scammed my way.
This is actually her first and last episode.
Yes, it absolutely is okay. I think, especially when I was in college, social media had just sort of started as a channel, as a thing to consume media on. I remember I was a Vine user back in the day, and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever.
R.I.P. Vine. Vine walked so that TikTok could run.
Yes, exactly. Wow, so profound. But yeah, and speaking of the guest later on in the episode, Sam, she and I worked together at a company called Koros and became friends because we both realized that we have similar backgrounds in film and comedy and screenwriting. And then we both ended up working for a strategic marketing agency.
Can you share a little more about that fun background?
Yeah.
Because I don't think most people know that we have a not so secret comedian that's helping to produce our content.
Yeah. So I went to school for film and theater. I don't even think social media marketing was something you could major in back in the day. Mm-hmm. So I graduated with my theater degree and I loved it. And afterwards, I still wanted to really be involved in that community. And I started taking classes at an improv theater in New Orleans. And a way to sort of pay for the classes was to do an internship, and they needed someone to run their social media. And never done this before in my life, but like I said, I've always loved the early days of YouTube and filming videos with my friends. And so I just made a case for myself and said, hey, I think I can do this, because I think I brought a unique perspective because I was a student, I was a performer there, but then I also knew what to look out for in terms of maybe what an audience member wants to see, in terms of posters, in terms of graphics or videos. So that was my first dip into it all. And then I moved to Austin, Texas, which has a great independent film scene. And I continued doing comedy there, started working for an independent film consultation company, which is a fancy way of saying that we help independent filmmakers with their like GoFundMe campaigns and their Indiegogos. And I would do the marketing for those. And then that was actually run by one of the founders of South by Southwest. And he was great. He was kind of kooky.
The best ones are.
Yes. And then he laid everyone off after a year because he was like, hey, this is kind of a lot to do, which is fair, I guess. And then after that, I really still wanted to continue marketing because everything that I had learned so far had been self-taught. And so I think that really helped me learn how to advocate for myself early on in my career. And I was like, well, if there's something that I don't know how to do, I can learn how to do it. And I have my own like unique voice that I can bring to any company. That's sort of what I led with when I was interviewing at Koros. And so, yeah, and then I started working there. And then that was kind of my first big girl job. And that's where I met Sam. It felt like grad school because I was actually properly learning digital marketing and content creation. Yeah, and then I was on the agency side, then I moved in-house, and then a couple companies later, now I'm here at Composely.
Yeah. And it's funny, like the properly training, you mentioned like grad school. I felt that in my first internship, my senior year, I learned more about B2B marketing through that internship than, I mean, I am maybe the oddity that did fall in love with marketing in high school and majored in it in college. But most colleges, it's a very niche curriculum. Like it's teaching you to go work for a big B2C brand. And that is not what most people end up doing. No. And B2B is so different. Yeah, I mean, to your point back then, like digital marketing and content marketing were kind of just becoming a thing. So even if I have a degree in marketing, the practical implication of that isn't the same thing. And so oftentimes you need that job, internship, experience, whatever, to like get that kind of boots on the ground experience to kind of, you know, like what you said, formally learn how to do some of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a point that I wanted to maybe share, I have a background in improv comedy specifically. I've been doing that for 10 years, which is very nerdy, but I love it so much. And the reason why I started doing it was actually because I have an anxiety disorder and I really struggled with public speaking and in high school and I had a great speech teacher who was like, hey, maybe you should do your debates as a character. And then that was kind of how I dipped into theater at first. But I think improv is such a great skill for everyone, especially if you don't want to pursue a career in comedy, because it really helps you learn about your own voice and what you find funny. And it helps you break down these walls and be a bit more vulnerable and not take yourself so seriously, which is such a good soft skill in such a competitive market. Like when you're trying to find a job and so many B2B brands really want that like unique brand voice. And it's like, well, what does that really mean? But it turns out it actually just means they just want you to be you. And I think improv helps you figure that out.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to what you guys are about to hear in a really incredible interview with Sam of this portfolio career. And if you stick on a ladder and you're going rung by rung, you sometimes miss some of these ancillary skill sets. And one thing that I think, I mean, I'm not at the clown level yet, but I also have some theater background. And I do think even from working with you, Franny, like I can see the ability to take risks or the ability to want to try something or have the courage to do it. Not everything's going to work out. You know, not every clown move is the right clown move, but it is finding that boundary. And I think especially at small companies or maybe less established companies as well, where a brand voice, you know, going back to content isn't as established, you do have to kind of poke and figure out where is that amoeba of what fits in a brand and what doesn't. And you can only poke and realize if you've gone too far or you haven't even gone far enough by being willing to take chances. And sometimes you need people with that portfolio background who are bringing you those unique perspectives on a team to kind of really help push and define what that looks like.
Totally. Yes. I love how you said poked because I love to poke. Yeah, you have to stay curious and ask questions. And also, I have failed so many times. Yeah, I feel like, but
We all have.
yeah, it's about failing gloriously and like failing like you would, which looks different to everyone. And I think knowing that at the end of the day, the success was in you presenting a new idea that was authentic to you.
I love it. We're going to fail gloriously, everyone. That's your takeaway. Cheers to failing gloriously.
Cheers.
My name's Samantha Lopez, and my formal title is Digital Channels Manager at Expedia Group. But over the last 5 years, that's really meant something different every year. It's such a kind of broad, nebulous title. Now, what that means is that I manage our multimedia on the B2B content strategy team. So part of that also is producing our podcast, Powering Travel.
Okay, so cool, big, nebulous title. But how did you get there? It's always my favorite question, just to kind of hear a little bit about the journey.
Yeah, so telling my story about my journey has been probably just as big of a feat in itself as engaging in my career. But I've recently come across the phrase portfolio career. Have you heard of that at all?
No, tell me more.
So basically, a portfolio career is less of having a career path and more of seeking out opportunities that are interesting to you, that are learning opportunities, and ultimately, it all kind of leads together, right? So instead of one career path, which I think a lot of people see as linear and almost align with like climbing a corporate ladder or whatever, it's a little bit different, right? So I'm kind of in this constant place of reevaluating what it is that I want right now, where it is that I want to learn and grow without the confines of having this, very strict path. So that nebulous title actually works for me right now. That's really been helpful for me. And I think timeline-wise, to give you some background, I have a degree in film production. So I was working in indie film here in Austin for about 8 years after college, while also working in the nonprofit world for some arts nonprofits here in town, really for some stability. And then I made like a hard pivot working in tech and specifically working in the social media space. So I was a social media strategist for about 7 years until very recently. I leaned back into my production background, and then I found myself pitching this podcast to Expedia Group, and they were like, okay, let's do it. And here we are 4 seasons later. I'm still doing that. Now I'm managing some video stuff on a different team. So it's definitely been really cool to kind of break open this idea of what a career path is and really just flex my muscles a little bit and learn a lot about the way that I work, my personality traits. I mean, I've taken every test, ENFJ, INFJ, whatever, those things.
I'm also an ENFJ.
Oh, yeah.
So nice to meet you. I haven't seen you at the groups.
Yeah. Some of us have moved over to the I side during the pandemic.
Totally fair.
There should be A in there, and ambivert is also another phrase that I've learned from a former leader of mine. So yeah, I think learning those things about myself, and then also, what are the things that challenge me, have really been the guiding light for my career, as opposed to eventually trying to be a CMO, because it's not necessarily the goal for me, but I know for many there are. But I think having this idea of this, portfolio career is really interesting and something I'm exploring right now.
I think that's incredible. And I'm getting this vision for any of the Harry Potter fans. I feel like so many people think of this ladder or this staircase of their career. And instead I'm getting the staircases that move and take you to fun new places with 3-headed dogs and live chessboards. Now I'm
absolutely. I mean, I think for a long time I was telling myself that was not a good thing, that I needed to have a very crisp resume and it needed to show my progression and all of this stuff. But, coming from the film world where I'm surrounded by people who are freelance artists and who are very clear in their craft, but then also straddling this line with the corporate world, there is that conflict of these people get to do whatever they want, but it's very clear. And you're managing kind of corporate bureaucracy and all of that stuff. And sometimes that dictates what direction you go, where you land, whatever. I'm like, how do I take, these concepts from both of these worlds and use it to my benefit? And then, of course, I was listening to a podcast and someone brought up this concept of a portfolio career. And then I was Googling, reading every article that I could. And finally that spoke to me. I was like, this is what I'm doing. This totally resonates for me. And I wish that more people understood that having such a diverse background isn't a bad thing. It really is a benefit, especially to hiring managers, right? Hiring managers should see that as a benefit. So yeah, I think, that's just been what I've really accepted about myself in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. And I will also be Googling to learn more about a portfolio career. But I think I would love to dive in a little more into that film background. And then also something you said in your intro about media. And I've been hearing this more and more in the market. I feel like with content, it's been, is it a blog? Is it written? Is it video? Is it audio? Podcasts are now both. But media seems to be, I feel like, this trending term of really what it is, like media marketing. I don't know, do we just coin that? Instead of content marketing is, how do you become this media? Like, do marketers now need to have the skill set of being media producers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think maybe it's a little bit of both, right? Do marketers need that? And then do content creators or people who are artists also need to understand marketing, right? And we live in a world now where that's a symbiotic relationship. And I think, the idea of media, multimedia is something that we are starting to adopt internally as well. I moved over to my team specifically because I had the podcast, and the video stuff ended up coming to my plate because it's like, oh, I've done this before. Let's continue to do it. And so that's my focus, working with content strategists whose focus is more of the traditional, like written things, ebooks, white papers, those kinds of things. Well, I don't know. I guess I can't necessarily tell people what to do. But as much as I was talking about
the mic is literally yours right now. Please tell us what to do.
I know, right? As much as I am leaning into this idea of a portfolio career and this concept of having many skills, I don't necessarily think that everybody should have all of the skills, right? So if you're a really strong marketer, it is a skill in itself to be able to delegate or to find those people with that background, right? So with me being on the team, it really alleviates some of the pressure for these other content strategists or the other marketers to have to learn the things that I come to the table with of like 15 years of experience. So it is nice to know Canva. Marketers should know things like tools that you have access to, CapCut, these things that people are using. But I don't necessarily think that everyone needs to know everything, which is something that I've also struggled with. I'm like, I need to know how to do everything or whatever, but that delegation and that building a strong team is really what's important.
Well, it is. And I think there's, and especially with AI, which we can go down that tangent eventually, but I think it's just going back to, if you know how to tell a good story, maybe you don't know exactly CapCut or you don't know how to execute that. But if you know that strategy, if you know the throughput line that's in everything you create, and then to your point, you build that really strong team, or you find the third-party resources to kind of help you set up that structure that then you can run with. If you don't know the story you're telling, or you don't know who you are or what you want your audience to know about you, it really doesn't matter what medium or media you create. If it's kind of bad or just run of the mill, you need more of that kind of core marketing principle first.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see that example in Hollywood, right? Like Joker just lost a ton of money and Lady Gaga was in it. You know what I mean? Like you can make something really slick with the best actors, the best stars. And if the story isn't coming through, if it's not working, it's not going to resonate with your audience. So I think that aspect of storytelling and really understanding your audience and, all of those marketing foundations is what it comes down to.
Yeah, well, and I'm probably going to maybe lose some DC fans in the audience, so I apologize. But if you look at Marvel and DC, I think like that's such a good use case of why was Marvel's cinematic universe so successful, and it has felt like DC is just trying to catch up, or it has felt like DC is just duplicating or replicating without actually bringing its own special sauce to the table. And I feel like that's a great lesson for marketers.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess along those lines too, is like seeing what other people are doing and trying to copy it or trying to do the same thing. It sometimes won't work, like your voice might be different, your audience might be different. And, I think as marketers, we're kind of constantly chasing what's new, what's happening, what are our competitors doing, how are they seeing success? And sometimes that's good stuff to know, but it's also really important to be able to use your own storytelling, your, company values, your brand, your voice as that guiding light, as opposed to, chasing the new shiny thing.
Absolutely. I love all of these pop culture references in our inspiration for the episode. I think it's so interesting. Obviously, Expedia is a more B2C. Would that be accurate? Brand? Primarily.
I love that you're saying that, because this opens the door for
I
me
knew
to
as
kind
soon
of
as I
explain
said
it
it
a little bit.
Yeah, I knew as soon as I said it, you're gonna be like, no, actually, you're completely wrong.
Yeah, well, you are, but that's fine. This is a learning experience.
Absolutely.
We're learning a lot about the company. So Expedia is actually a two-sided marketplace, right? So you have the travelers, but then you have all of the inventory that we bring to the platform, right? There's hotel, cruise, car, vacation rental, activities. We have travel agents who are working with us. There's so much technology at play too with a lot of our customers. So I particularly work on our B2B side of the house. So the podcast Powering Travel is B2B focused. We talk a lot about our travel providers and what they can do, taking learnings from what we're kind of understanding about the travelers on the other side of the marketplace. So it is a two-sided marketplace and, makes for a really interesting business.
Yeah, absolutely. Earlier this season, we were talking with the head of content at Clutch, which is also, again, kind of that two-sided, is you have consumers providing reviews and also searching for information and searching for service providers. And then you have the actual service providers that, of course, want to get found and be able to spread their message and all that good stuff. And so a lot of similarities there. I mean, media, I think, would make a lot of sense in B2C. You're just using film, and I think a lot of people think of media more in that B2C. I'd love to hear a little more of how you got media to be focused for that B2B side of the market.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think so. As I mentioned, I shifted over to the current team that I'm on because I had the podcast under my belt. And the podcast idea really came from having an understanding of what like our channels were doing from an engagement perspective. It was also during the pandemic that, or I guess, right when we were allowed to leave our houses, that we started to really think about, okay, how do we make our content a bit more dynamic? How are we reaching our partners so that they're getting the information that we have, but not in the traditional ways? Because we would see that fluctuate, and we have a large range of audiences that we're trying to reach as well. So we thought, okay, well, let's try this. The first season was a bit of a pilot season where we were trying to address different things. We talked a lot about, it spanned several kind of lines of business, so to speak. So we talked vacation rental, we talked car rental, tons of different things. And, we got a lot of really great feedback. And so we invested in the next two seasons over the next year. I guess that was 2023. And just put more money behind marketing and saw listenership really skyrocket. So for us, I talked a little bit earlier about chasing this new shiny thing, but I find myself as like that go-to person now of finding new channels. What are new ways that we can really align our messaging with these new pieces of content, right? And so the podcast has also taken a new form, kind of part of this testing, right? This innovation. And we've allowed ourselves to kind of explore more in the audio space and then really be thinking about video and what that means for us. So some of it might be innovative. Some of it might be, just meeting best practices of the industry. But yeah, I think right now that's kind of where we're at, is like, okay, we're really putting our stake in the ground in terms of leaning into the multimedia. What that means for us may look different this year than it does next year.
Are you allowed to share any of what you're thinking, or even some trends that you're seeing that you're just interested in exploring?
Ooh, trends. Yeah. I mean, of course, AI is something that has been on my mind. I have no idea even where to start, to be honest. It's more of like an internal struggle. I think for me, I've read a lot of books. I've been really plugged into these like AI tech communities. And I've become more clear with my POV, I think, with AI. And someone that we interviewed for the Powering Travel podcast last year, her name is Si-Hoon Yao. She founded WIT, which is Web and Travel. It's a website. It's, a publication, also has a podcast. So she said we should be using AI for things that, aren't necessarily things that we would have to use our creative brains for, right? So things that are dull, things that are dangerous, things that we want to automate so that we don't have to do them. Because
what does
I think
dangerous mean? I feel like most people are like, if it's dangerous, don't use AI. You can't trust it yet.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I would say dangerous in this sense would be if you were using AI for I don't know, tactile machines or something, and maybe there are things that only humans can do right now, but creating robots to be able to do that and react. So it's the sense of automation and AI. So that's also another thing too, is knowing the difference between what automation is and what AI is, right? Where machine learning comes in. And I think a lot of people are just throwing around this term of AI as anything that is computers are doing it. But so it's part of that too, right? That's part of that conversation. It's how are we controlling the automation, and then what are we allowing the AI to do, right? Since it only functions on the information that you input into it. And so from a marketing perspective, I'm really looking at things. If things are going to be automated, it's okay, well, if we're thinking about social media ads, for example, how do we automate the optimization, right? There's a lot of tools right now that are currently doing that, where, the best, highest performing image will be changed into, your ad set or whatever. So things like that, where it is pretty simple. From an AI perspective, and it comes to art and visuals and things, there was a woman yesterday. She's a writer, producer, actor. I forget her name, but she came across my Instagram feed, and she was talking about, we are using AI for imagery, and this imagery is basically being fed films, movies, these things that are publicly available, right? But that doesn't mean that they can be legally used. I'm dating myself here, but every VHS we used to watch was giving us this warning in the beginning that was FBI official seal. If you copy this, you're going to be prosecuted. And now we're just feeding it into a machine, allowing the machine to make some version of it, and then, spitting out what that is. And so I think I am kind of struggling with the imagery aspect of things and how we're kind of creating. From a copywriting standpoint, though, that is something that I definitely am exploring a little bit of how do we use that? I mean, I use Grammarly every day, and Grammarly is learning the way that I write, learning, whatever. And I love that. But, straight up using ChatGPT for a whole, blog is something where I'm okay, where's the line here? We can't rely on the machine to effectively, send our messaging or show our benefits or whatever.
Even Grammarly, the number of times, this is the pro and con of working at a content writing company, because the number of times I get slacks from my editors and they're like, Nicole, this was great, but this was grammatically incorrect. And I'm just but Grammarly told me, that was a Grammarly change. They're yeah, Grammarly is wrong a lot, and it lies to you, and you don't always want to hit accept all.
Oh yeah,
on the Grammarly side of things, because it can steer you away.
It can, but language is also always changing. Which that book will change your life.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of you, that book, Sam and I were talking earlier about this book called Word Slut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's called Word Slut by Amanda Montell. She's written several books since, if you're familiar with the book Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism, and she just released one called The Magical Age of Overthinking. And so, yeah, it's very good. And she's got accompanying podcasts for both. And yeah, she's great. Amanda Montell, I feel like I have a weird, what's it called? A social relationship, parasocial relationship with her. Cause I feel like she's just my genius friend who's telling me all this information. Yeah. That book Word Slut, it's all about really the evolution of language from a feminist lens, right? So she talks a lot about gender, how the trans community is referring to, different parts of their body and likes and and all of these things. And so I think from, a marketer perspective, it was actually really interesting to learn, these guidelines, these things that we've been told are right, evolved into that, right? And they will eventually evolve out of that. And so I think, you know, we as marketers have to be kind of conscious of the fact of the rules that we maintain and the rules that, you know, we're willing to push a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and going back to the AI piece and like when to use it and when not, kind of goes to what we were saying with media too. AI now is taking a lot of the execution for you. And so it's almost more important to, again, have the good prompts, know the different strategies, be able to clearly articulate your objective so that the execution can go in. But that's really what you should be doing for anyone, any content creator, any freelancer, any resource. We should have always been communicating with this level of detail and care and thought. And now it's just because a robot can do it cheaper and faster and a little more easily. We're like, okay, well, if we want that efficiency, I guess I need to put the time into my prompt or into my brief.
Yeah.
But really, we should be doing that anyways.
Yeah. I mean, that efficiency comes at a cost, right? And I think I am also I'm generally just skeptical and by nature now. And I think anything that I'm given, I'm like, okay, I will check it. I will fix it. There has to be some hands on it. Like, I will never trust a self-driving car. You know what I mean? No. Like, there's just human instinct and, you know, your style, your voice, whatever, that needs to be infused in all of this stuff. So sure, fine, get a V1. But after, you know, the first draft, it's like, you really have got to work it. So yeah, I don't know. And my view, I'm also willing to adapt my view on AI as I continue to test personally. I'm less apt to bring new ideas in the AI space to the organization if I'm not confident in it myself. So that's just something I'm exploring personally, is like, okay, I think I need to have a POV on AI because I know that that's going to be something that we're going to have to be thinking about as a broad organization.
Deadlines looming and you're juggling a million projects? Maybe you've tried outsourcing to an agency before, but how can you be sure that they're going to deliver on your specific goals on time and on budget? Well, look no further than Clutch, the #1 leading marketplace for B2B service providers. Clutch streamlines your search, helping you kick off projects faster so you can focus on what you do best. On Clutch, you can select from over 2,000 unique services and specialties to quickly narrow in on a comprehensive list of the agencies best for your project. Then filter down to a short list of qualified providers through filters, or use Clutch's project brief technology to match you to the best fits. From there, just compare the providers by reading in-depth verified client reviews to learn more about the work that these agencies have done for businesses like yours, so you can make a confident hiring decision. Get matched to the best agencies for your business and request quotes at clutch.co/content matters. You'll be one step closer to having those projects off your never-ending to-do list so you can shift focus back to the big picture. That's clutch.co/content matters. How does, thinking about trends, especially in media, I feel like influencer marketing is obviously over the last 2 years really come to a rise. On the B2B side, is that something that you guys think about, or is that more maybe what your counterparts focus on?
Yeah, I would say on the B2B side, it's a little more tricky. I think the definition of influencer is a little bit different. From a consumer side, it's kind of a numbers game, right? Because influencers are then identified by number of followers, how big their reach is. Whereas on the B2B side, we're really having to think strategically about their business influence. How big are their names? Are they associated with, a publication? Could that possibly be a way? So we can't be thinking about influencers in the traditional sense, like social media. We're thinking about influencers as, it used to be where you're thinking about their word of mouth kind of marketing, right? Like, are these folks that we want to be spokespeople? So it's using that kind of language of, how do we get people who are in the industry, who are also travel providers, who understand the business, the travel industry in general, to be able to be spokespeople for us. And I think it's a little more tough doing that just because, the way that people network is different, people's job titles are different, so it's an interesting kind of thing for us to be thinking about from the B2B side. But I do think, all of our partners, whether that's B2B or B2C, are travelers themselves, right? So I think that's also something that we have to always remember is, while we might be thinking about influencers are for B2C and then these kind of spokespeople, very different, strategic batch of people on the B2B side, are a different thing. They're all travelers. I think that's kind of the broader message that Expedia Group likes to send is that, when the traveler does well, we all do well, right? Because essentially we are all travelers. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's kind of not really a concise answer, but I also think there's room for us to evolve that too.
Going back, of course, travel was very impacted by outside forces in 2020. And you mentioned this was kind of an idea that came as we were coming out of that time. I'm curious, like the transferable experience that you guys had with that. When a market or a sector or a team goes through big changes, especially external ones, I feel like tech went through that with SVB falling in early 2023. I feel like tech is still coming out of that. Like, how do you find resilience? How do you dive in and just manage something that is so outside of your control as a marketer, but yet you still have to figure out how to keep going forward? I'm just curious, like, how you guys approach that, maybe any lessons you learned from that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point and a really good acknowledgement because, working for a travel company during that time was scary personally, right? It's like, what's going to happen with my job? And everything was unknown. And so I think I really had to root myself.
Especially there, you have to be so thoughtful of your message. Like, you don't want to come across as deaf or unfeeling. Like, hey, let's still try and figure out how to keep this sector going when everyone in the world doesn't know what to do with this, and there are bigger things at play.
Yeah. Well, what I noticed was that we did a lot of listening, right? We had to really understand how this was impacting all of our customers, whether they were travelers, whether they were travel providers, and everyone's businesses were different, right? Especially in different markets. So some markets were, more restrictions, less restrictions. And so I think, from a higher level, we did a lot of listening and tried to really understand what everybody was dealing with so that we could be more solutions focused and figure out, okay, what are the things that we can do right now and what are the things that are out of our control? And I think that's been made very clear in, a lot of the external facing messaging that we've sent out, that we've posted, all of that kind of stuff. And I think for me personally, I think I've just gotten used to the fact that, like, this is a constantly changing business and there are just new things and new challenges. So very similar to the idea of, in the film world where you kind of have to kill the things you're most precious about, like your ideas. And, you might see something come across an edit in the editing room and you're like, oh, but it took 2 days to shoot this thing. And the pyrotechnics didn't work or, worked perfectly, but it's not working for the story. You got to cut it. And so for me, I've worked on several initiatives in the past where I spent 9 months really building up this one thing. And then, all of a sudden business changed and I just have to shift gears. So, from a employee perspective, we've really been taken care of and we're really assured during that time of supporting you to be able to work from home. Support that we got from the organization was really clear that they cared about us. So I think that helped, right? So coming out of that time, we did a ton of research around what travelers are doing now, this kind of idea of revenge travel and, how people shifted from domestic, short road trips to, more types of travel. So I think that is then what we bring to our travel providers, right? We've got all this research, all of these inputs from our travelers and giving that over to them in these really sleek reports and blog posts and all of that stuff. And now, in the form of podcasts has been really helpful. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a level of resilience, it's a level of learning and it's taking those things and turning them into really positive. So it's that whole like take lemons and turn them into lemonade.
Do you think that as marketers, we have to be on the latest and greatest platform in order to be good marketers?
The amount of time I have spent on this exact question.
Yep.
So as somebody who has spent the better part of the last 10 years in the social media space, I went from 100%. Everybody needs to know all the platforms you need to know that the platforms exist and what they do, So going back to that idea of having the right people, kind of guide you in that direction, let them do that. So for me, I got out, well, it's very recent, but like I have not had to touch any influencer marketing at all. And now that is the biggest thing, right? We've got people dedicated to that work and it's great, right? But I don't need to know that, right? You need to know that it's happening. You need to know how effective it is and figure out, does that work for you? Because otherwise you're spinning your wheels and you're spending a lot of resources to make that happen. So, and then it might not even work for your business. So I personally am like it took me a long time to even, the first thing I'll do whenever a new platform comes is like I'll claim my username so that they're consistent across all of them. Like I don't have TikTok on my phone. Like I was like, I can't be on TikTok. I know myself. I'll be addicted to Instagram, but that's it. I don't do Facebook anymore. My relationship to social has just changed. And I think your personal relationship with any platform can change so long as is this something that works for the business? And if it is, then you can figure out, okay, is this something to outsource or, do we need a team on this? Or is this something that I want to understand? Because like, you don't have to know what Moodang is in order to be a good marketer, right? And so for some brands it works to follow these trends, and then some it's like really cringe, just like what are you doing here? You don't even go here. You know what I mean?
I think that's fair. I mean, same. I feel like I'm a millennial. I see the TikTok trends 2 weeks later on my reels. I'm fine living in that space. LinkedIn, I'm obsessed with LinkedIn games. You're not playing
LinkedIn has games?
Yes. Literally mind-blowing. If you are a New York Times games person, LinkedIn now has games.
Wow.
2 of them I think are okay. 2 of them I'm now obsessed with. I like them better than Wordle and Connections.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Wordle. Okay.
Fun tip.
I need to look
great.
into this.
Going back to resilience, I think for leaders, it's, first of all, take care of your people, customers and employees. Like, I think what I heard from you is that there was space to even think about how to keep the brand going forward because you felt psychologically safe during that time. And I think that's often missed in hard times, whether it's as severe as a pandemic, whether it's hurricanes and flooding in the Carolinas. I saw someone post, it's hard because unfortunately outbound and a lot of sales and marketing messages, like, I wish we could say we are all doing our due diligence and looking at where is this person located. We're probably not. But like, hey, let's not send, the automated, are you busy? Did you get eaten by an alligator to people who are living in the Carolinas right now? Because it's not the right message to send. Unfortunately, I'm sure that some little poor BDR out there just said like, enroll in sequence and wasn't paying broader attention. But it's being that human first, creating that space to say like, you're okay. We don't know what's coming next. We don't know, but like we've got you. And then everyone's kind of on the same page to say, okay, now how, like you're taking care of, how can we best take care of our customers during this time too?
I was working with peers who were also experiencing this kind of worldwide thing. And then everyone had their own circumstances. And so it brought a lot of like built-in compassion too. So I don't think you can have resilience without compassion. And I think that was a real sticking point for me during that time. Like that really kept me going of like, okay, I'm surrounded by people who take care of me. I take care of them from like that, psychological safe space perspective. And that was really important.
For sure. As we look to kind of wrap the conversation, what advice do you have to marketers right now who are maybe interested in media, building out a media first content strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lifelong learner. Obviously, I talked about this idea of a portfolio career, constantly seeking out like, what am I being fulfilled with, but also where are there opportunities to learn? And you learn a lot from your peers. Like, what are they dealing with? What are they learning about their audiences? And so you'll find yourself in spaces where you didn't know this person outside of work is a novelist or they are working on different things. And so they bring a different perspective. So always learn from the people around you. It's more than just sitting in on webinars and taking online courses and all of that. Like being able to have clear conversations around things like AI and people's perspectives and things. is what's really important. So always, just kind of be curious and kind of learning from the people around you, because I think that kind of competitive analysis and reading articles can only take you so far, right?
Thank you so, so much. Honestly, tons of great insights. Yeah, so many books I now have to add to my Audible queue. I know what I'm going to be doing for the next couple weeks. But
I'm sorry, Sash, you're welcome. I'm like such a book person right now. And yeah, it's changed my life. So yeah,
that's exciting. Well, keep us posted on that journey. Make sure to follow on LinkedIn. I don't know if you're posting on your professional channels, but if you are, we'd love to follow and support you in that journey.
Yeah, I should be a little bit better about that. But yeah, my corporate baddie persona is LinkedIn, whereas my
baddie. What a podcast name.
I'm sure somebody has already
missed opportunity.
That is not my term. I'm chronically online, obviously. So someone has said that and it's infused itself in my brain. But that's in my head. That's my Sasha fear. So I'm like, I have to show up to work as like a corporate baddie. And then outside of work, I'm my regular self. But it's all one self, right?
It's all one self. Welcome to Friends Matter, where we're celebrating wins from fellow marketers. This week, we're featuring Ben Brown. Ben is a San Diego-based marketer and strategist who recently started a new gig as the vice president of marketing at Fairmarkit. Ben's story really represents our goal of this segment, to support other marketers and just put good into the world. So Ben and I are both part of a really amazing community called CMO Coffee Talk, which is run by the Sixth Sense team. If you are a CMO or a marketing leader and are not part of this community, I cannot recommend it more. It's incredible to see so many people who are genuinely just want to help and share their experiences, share advice, get on calls, make recommendations about tech stack, and of course, share potential job opportunities, which is exactly how Ben got connected to the team at Fairmarkit to begin with. And in a tough market, it's really encouraging to hear stories where there are a bunch of people from all across the world in a Slack community who are just trying to help people connect to other people and find good opportunities. So congrats, Ben, on the new role. Excited to see you crush it. And we'll make sure to leave a link to the CMO Coffee Talk Slack group in the show notes if you'd like to join. And of course, if you have a friend that's starting a new role or launching a new campaign or just doing really cool things, please let us know. You can nominate them at compose.ly/friends-matter. That's compose.ly/friends-matter. Thanks for listening to this episode of Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. If you like the show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Otherwise, you can find all the resources you need to stay connected with us in the show notes. Till next time.